Hello, dear listener. Welcome under the fog of war. Thank you for tuning into this channel. You are listening to the first podcast of the series dedicated to Iran. Hope you will enjoy it. States and cultures that ever occupied the whole or parts of Iranian plateau always played pivotal role in the life of the region I am describing, more so in the time of their imperial greatness. Direct or indirect influence of various Iranian states and empires, while in the zenith of their power, reached far out of their natural geographical or political boundaries. Fame and glory of Achaemenids, Parthians, Sasanians, Seljuks, and Safavids was known and felt far and wide. But as often as achieving the status of superpower, Iran frequently experienced long periods of interregnum, times when nations' political and cultural significance was shrinking down to its immediate footprint, sometimes dwindling to what may appear a point of complete extinction. That was the case, for example, after the early 7th century Arab Islamic conquest, or in the wake of Mongol invasions of 1200s. As a target of this series of podcasts, I have selected last interregnum period Iran has lived through. That is a time span of nearly 300 years that started at the turn of the 18th century with the weakening and demise of the Safavid dynasty and lasted till the Islamic Revolution of 1979. But before moving over to the main subject, I would like to explain what name Iran means to me in political and ethno-geographical sense. If we look at the political map of Iran today and compare it to the early Safavid domains, it becomes obvious that despite all the fundamental shifts taking place in the region over the last 3 centuries, the country of Shah Ismail Khatai largely remained intact. It covers the huge landmass between Zagros Mountains in the west and Hindu Kush Range in the east. Caspian Sea, flanked by Caucasus on one side and Karakum Desert on the other, crowns its north. Persian Gulf washes its south. Southeast corner of the country is limited by deserts and peaks of Balochistan. This description fits neatly into geopolitical realm of Safavids and all subsequent to them Iranian states up to the modern time. This is what can be described as a core land of Iran 17th century onward. Grand but not lasting conquests of Shah Abbas and Nadir Shah beyond these logical borders cannot be counted as part of the mainland Iran. This type of territorial expansion could only be achieved through the military and administrative genius of a single ruler, consolidating and straining all possible resources of their native land. Great gunpowder emperors had broken out of the natural boundaries of the Iranian plateau and captured enormous swathes of territory both in the east and the west. However, these conquests only lasted as long as their authors sat on the throne. The death of conquerors signaled retreat back to the mainland, where a proud nation would lick its wounds, rebuild its exhausted economy, and relive the glory of the past. Unfortunately, up to this day, the Iranian nation still harbors that ancient imperial dream of ruling Mesopotamia and Levant. The dream that through ceaseless warfare with other equally ambitious empires devastated Iran for millennia. It is true that during past 300 years the country had suffered irrecoverable loss of some of its core territories. The most damaging one was in the north, where Russia's imperial designs in the Caucasus pushed ancient overlords of the region south of Araz River. Once plucked out of the imperial crown, the jewels of Qarabağ and Shirvan were gone forever, leaving deeply scarred national memory in their wake. Predominantly Orthodox Christian central and western parts of Transcaucasia had always been a contested possession, and their passing under Russian control was inevitable. On the other hand, fertile plains of Qarabağ, Aran and Mugan, terminating in the north by the famous Bab al-Abwab or Gates of Darband, were always part of the core Iranian territories in geographical, historical, and political sense. Their loss came as a shock. There were others, less painfully felt concessions, such as western slopes of Hindu Kush, with its ancient center in Herat, that Iran had to relinquish finally to local tribal confederations. Tekke Turkmens claimed all the lands beyond Atrak River. But in both cases, loss of barren and scarcely populated fringes of the realm had little impact on the nation. If anything, it simplified the task of protecting Khorasan and its northeastern frontiers from depredations of marauding nomads. With borders of the country defined, we now can look at what it was made of. The topography of the land has been roughly divided into two opposites, like two parts of yin and yang joined in perpetual struggle. On one side, there are high and low mountain ranges and plateaus covered with lush greenery and interspersed with fertile river valleys. On the other, there are semi-arid hills running down into vast expanses of barren deserts. The latter occupy the southeastern part of the country, while former towers from the northwest. Such a lay of the land could not fail to affect the way humans have settled it. All the principal urban centers and settled rural districts are skirting Iran's topography in a large semicircle, joining east to west, with the top of the arch touching on the southern shores of the Caspian Sea. Its opposite, in the southeast corner, is made up by deserts and vast arid expanses of hilly terrain that extends from the heart of the country and all along the extended shore of the Gulf. The great dent in the coastline is the famous Strait of Hormuz. Moving on to major urban centers. The main distinct urban settlement axis runs through the country between Zagros and Alborz ranges from northwest to southeast. It starts at Tabriz, the capital of Azerbaijan, passes through Ghazvin-Tehran-Hamadan triangle, continues over Qom and Isfahan to Shiraz, and terminates at Bushehr on the Persian Gulf shore. Another axis runs from west to east. It starts in Tehran, skirts lush provinces of Mazandaran and Gorgan in the north, and ends in Mashhad, capital of Khorasan, in the east. Yet another axis of Kermanshah, Ahwaz, Khorramshahr runs between western slopes of Zagros range and river Tigris, and connects Kurdistan in the north, Lorestan in the center, and Khuzestan in the south. All of these avoid great deserts of Dasht-e-Kavir and Dasht-e-Lut that dominate sparsely populated provinces of Yazd, Kerman, Semnan and Balochistan in the southeast. I have deliberately excluded from this description core territories lost at the turn of the 18th century. Logically speaking, once gone, Darband, Shirvan, Mugan, Qarabağ, oases of Merv, districts of Balkh and Herat have become parts of other realms, and their description belongs elsewhere in this channel. Suffice it to say that these territories will still play a prominent part in some podcasts of these series, and that will be accompanied by a brief description of their ethno-geographical composition. At last, I would like to talk about the name of the country. Is it Iran or is it Persia? Is the modern one a rightful heir of the old one, or vice versa? Where do we stop using one and switch to the other? Questions that really deserve answers. These naturally lay in the ethno-cultural composition of the country, and I will try to expand on this subject in the next podcast. For now, please note that for consistency, toponym Iran will be used throughout the whole series. Toponym Persia will only be used if required by context. Hope you have enjoyed it. Please subscribe, comment, or like as you see fit. All questions, suggestions, or requests for additional podcast content are welcome.